about how great we are and how do we amplify our success stories. And thank you. And throughout my career, I learned that I need to think and expand opportunities for not only to tell my story, but also to find more collaborators who are better storytellers so that more people can join me to fight to reach the goal that I want to reach. And the panelists that I'm bringing here will help us to understand how and see how this can happen. And so let's begin with a round of introduction to the 4 wonderful panelists who came today. And please say 1 minute about yourself, your initiative, and what would you like to offer this afternoon. I'll begin with PARAMITA MOHAMAD, as you are in the screen, in the big screen.
Yeah, could you please take my face off that big screen? That makes me very conscious, although I always hide myself. Okay, so my name is PARAMITA MOHAMAD. You can call me Mita. I am the CEO or Principal Consultant of Communication for Change. It's a consulting firm that combines rigor plus creativity in social change communications. I specialize in talking to people who don't care, and I'm obsessed about breaking through the echo chamber. Thank you.
Can you all hear me still? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Next is Baby Ruth from Voyage Film. Hi,
hello. Hi, thank you for having me here. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Baby Ruth. I'm a filmmaker and founder of Voyage Film Studios. We do documentaries and narrative films, especially independent films tackling social issues, and we collaborate with independent filmmakers. My work basically is focused on social impact using documentary films and shattering the ceiling, beyond cultural borders and people that are not really aware or not really familiar with documentary films. And we try to promote documentary films as a neutral platform to engage stakeholders and other groups, for hopefully social change.
Thank you so much, Baby Ruth. Next, we have Irfan Amali, also an Ashoka Fellow.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor for me to be here, to be part of the panels. I'm Irfan Amali. I am a co-founder and director of Peace Generation Indonesia. Peace Generation Indonesia is co-founded 14 years ago, started with the very simple works. It's about the modules, teaching teachers how to teach kids about the peace and tolerance. But it became a movement, and now we diversify many products like movie, games, and for last 5 years, we almost using in every program we use games, because we found that game is very effective ways to disseminate the peace values. I'm happy here to share our story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irfan. Last but not least, we have ALANDA KARIZA. She was an Ashoka Young Changemaker when she was in her teen years. Now she's also a social entrepreneur. Can you please introduce yourself, ALANDA, what you do now, and what would you like to offer? Can you hear me, ALANDA?
Okay. Yeah, I hear you well, that I'm worried about my connection. Okay. I'm currently insights consultancy. research focus is about storytelling in female entrepreneurs and how it can create an impact in their business. I also used to run a youth conference. That's why I was an Ashoka Young Changemaker for 10 years. It's called the Indonesian Youth Conference. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's begin with the juice of this conversation. I'd like to start with Baby Ruth. Baby Ruth is a prolific Filipino documentary filmmaker. Her film Sunday Beauty Queen, about a migrant worker beauty pageant in Hong Kong. It's now in Netflix. You guys can find out about it. And so Baby Ruth, people say that documentaries are preaching to the choir, but in your experience, how have you brought different stakeholders? How have you brought really people who have not cared about the issue to right in the center and get them to do some action?
Thanks, Amelia. Yeah, well, I mean, I've done documentaries for more than 10 years now. I've started doing documentaries for television, which is very templated and, part of a pipeline where, there's a host and everything is coming from a third person point of view. And then I've done documentaries for NGOs where it is advocacy in nature, promoting a campaign to save the environment, or to gather people to support an advocacy campaign. And now that I've become an independent filmmaker, I've realized that there is another approach to do documentaries, and it's really about creating the right perspective, using the power of the lens. With Sunday Beauty Queen, I shattered all the things that I've learned, throughout the years that I've been doing documentaries. And once and for all, I created a new path to tell the stories from the perspective of the domestic workers themselves, in a deliberate way that is not exposing their hardships, but celebrating their struggles and making sure that they too, no matter how disadvantaged they are, can contribute big time, to the affairs of the world. And that somehow changed the way we look at them through this documentary. And I've realized that, we've been watching documentaries and it makes us really depressed. It makes us really, sad about the affairs of the world. While I think it's important that we see what's going on behind the scene, which are not really tackled by mainstream media and corporate societies per se, but I think it's really about striking that right synergy and balance between information, facts, and also the sensation that we want people to take away after watching a documentary film, and hopefully create a ripple effect so that there is a certain level of call to action, from these sectors, that they too can be part of, of the movement to improve the lives of the disadvantaged that we are trying to represent through the lens that we're using.
Can you explain a little bit? Now, for people who don't know a lot about documentaries, can you explain how you create your campaign so that, you can get, lawyers, many people behind you to help the cause of the domestic workers, the people in your films?
It's basically, well, we to be candid about it, we really did a strong SWOT analysis. What is SWOT analysis? Really identifying what is the strength of our story, what is the strength of the audience, because audience and film, they come together. It's very important that we respect what the audience want and who we are speaking to. And we also identify the weakness of the documentary, because we are just a small company. We're not a big media conglomerate. We are just a small company based here in the Philippines, but we have small partners, and we tap those other independent partners who we think believe in the same ideal that we cater to. And for me, it's really about creating the right synergy with all these institutions by using the power of documentaries, or short films, music videos, animations, and other creative contents as an offering, as a service, for organizations to use, so everybody can achieve a collective results that are beneficial to them, but more so beneficial to the voices that is being represented in the film. And we at Voyage, we've somehow learned to practice the mantra on how our creative talents and products can complement organizations with similar objectives to bring forth, Southeast Asian voices through storytelling that can cross borders and cultural boundaries. So how do we do that?
Ruth, yeah. Can you give us an example? How do you, you know, that the migrant workers in Hong Kong, they have a lot of needs. They're vulnerable. Their rights are somewhat protected, but can be strengthened. You know, there are organizations who can, people have been campaigning a lot for them. How do you, as a filmmaker, help these organizations to campaign more? Or, how do you engage people who have not cared to care about this issue with your film?
We actually designed a campaign in different years. We created a short-term campaign, which is just to reach out the audience, the target audience that we want to speak to, mainly just the relatives of the OFWs. And then, we met them. There are conferences like the Good Pitch in Southeast Asia, where we really find the organizations that have similar interests to the concern of the OFWs. But me personally, my main target, the audience of the film is really the relatives of the OFW. So we spoke to them. We put billboards at the airport where these people are meeting their families. We attended Christmas parties of OFWs in the Philippines, and we booked in cinemas. So we identified the right festivals. Here in the Philippines, Christmas is very important. So it's during this time where families gather together and go to the cinema. So we applied to this festival, and somehow we made it. So that festival gave access to about 40,000 audience for them to view the film. And from that 40,000 audience, the ripple effect started to come in. So we met legal groups who volunteered to mount legal mission to Hong Kong, Japan, and other countries. We met lawmakers who booked the film so that they can discuss policies surrounding migration, and also celebrities, apparently who have similar stories and relatives, and who were raised by nannies that are, far away from them already. So by activating this audience, we created that sort of ripple effect that somehow created more screenings for the film. And then, yeah, we went from there. And of course, the festival is a traditional way of distributing the film. So we used the festival, but not more than attending the festival, we made sure that we invited, again, the target audience that we want to speak to, and make sure that they are, the number one in the priority to reach this content.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So basically, there's a good film. The festivals and the celebrities are saying how good the film is, attracts, and then you book screenings with families, attracts more and more audience, and therefore you can reach the lawyers, the people who can strengthen the migrant workers to then create actions. That's really wonderful, Baby Ruth. Next, we can go to Mita, PARAMITA Mohamad. You care a lot to speak to people who don't care. So if a nonprofit comes to you to create a campaign, what do you tell them?
Well, the first thing is, okay, so what's your theory of change? That's always my first question. What's your theory of change? What needs to be true to make it happen, right? And then before that, we always go to research, and usually nonprofits, they cannot afford us. They're donors who pay for us. So the first thing, like, okay, it's not going to be cheap because I want to run a survey. And nowadays you can use Google Survey. If you just finish running a survey on electoral threshold in Google Survey and political corruption in Google Survey. So the first thing first, strategy is about 5 things, yeah? So first is, where are we now? Where do you want to go? So that's basically your theory of change. And what's more important is that I have to understand, everybody has to understand what stands in between. And what stands in between is always have to be written or understood from the point of view of people who can help you get your change done. So then after that, then we know that, okay, so this is the where you are now, this is where you need to be, this is what stands in between, and let's try to find the chosen let's choose the best approach to overcome this barrier. A lot of times people come to me with a to-do list or even a wish list. This is what we want to achieve. It's like, yeah, okay, but what's the barrier? So that's the first thing. So to make it easier, let's use an example on how the first pitfall is you think people care as much as you do. If you are a nonprofit, you live and breathe that issue. You live and breathe your change agenda. Many people don't because they have life, yeah, maybe better than you, so more exciting or fulfilling than you. So, you know, they don't care. So for me, it's just like, okay, so what's that in between is most of the time people don't care or they don't know, or it's just too hard to understand for them. If they're thinking about the next cycle to pay their credit card, which is in Indonesia is on the 15th or in the 1st, you know, that's what basically what you care about, yeah, how to pay the minimum. So the first point is like, okay, they probably don't care as much as you do, and it's not their fault. So if you still think about educating, about enlightening, about informing, forget it. It's always about seducing, persuading, cajoling, coaxing, wooing, yeah. So that's always my first rule. Okay, we understand where they are now. It's not their fault they don't care. So don't think they care as much as you do. And secondly, meet people where they are. And that's why we need not only data, but we need science. Yeah. So for example, I work with a coalition of nonprofits addressing climate change. But in Indonesia, when you talk about climate change, mostly you talk about deforestation. And we conducted qualitative research first, and we learned that in 2017, people didn't even know the term deforestation. Okay, deforestation was not the same like reforestation. No. So we actually, after this study, we know how to talk to people, but of course, the nonprofits and the donor insisted that we have to talk about corruption in natural resources. So to ask political candidates to express their view and natural resource corruption, and then of course it didn't go well. It's like, who cares about natural resource corruption? In Indonesia, when people talk about corruption, we learn from the data that it was really about the downfall of the purpose. It's always like that, the morality story of the corruption. So natural resource corruption, what is that? So, okay, let's change the gear. I mean, we learned about this. Indonesians are mostly conservative, 95% of them are conservative. So if you're not them to care and not conservative, they are patriotic, they're about national pride. So let's reframe this issue. Deforestation, it is not about climate change, because nobody knows about climate change. The latest survey think that people know about climate change, but my latest data shows 88% people claim to have heard about climate change, only 48% out of them who can actually understand what it is. Yeah, we have the data, 3,000 respondents. Okay, so it's not about climate change. So deforestation is about preserving the rank of Indonesia as the third biggest country, country with third biggest area of rainforest. Make sure that the rank doesn't go down, let alone being in the same par with Malaysia, because that's a big no-no for Indonesians to be on the same par with Malaysia, right? So we didn't say about Malaysia, but then we created this campaign. It's about that. To tell the newly elected president, so please take care of the forest, because we don't want to be no longer become the third. We didn't want Indonesia's position to go down. Yeah. So well, it was successful in a way that we broke the echo chamber. The signers of the petitions, we have two, from the change.org, which basically echo chamber. So ladies and gentlemen, if you think you have a lot of petitions in change.org, you're basically touching the echo chamber. So don't thump your chest on that. But the thing is, we get that outside the change.org, we get a lot of petitions. And when we calculate the cost to get one petition, is basically quite economical compared to do canvassing, for example. So that's first. No, but maybe they don't care as much as you do, and meet them where they are. If they're conservative, patriotic, nationalistic pride, then reframe that way. Yeah. So that's what we do. And thirdly, this is what we have to remember, is that it is not about correcting personal belief. Most of the time, when there are things that are not correct, it has something to do with normative beliefs. So let's, for example, child marriage in Indonesia. Years after years, millions of donor dollars after millions of donor dollars trying to fix this issue. And then I realized that a lot of interventions are about fixing the personal belief about, and the personal belief is also rational. So it's cost benefit analysis. So for example, if you defer marriage, I mean, if you don't allow your children to get married now, there will be, you will avoid this risk and there will be a benefit in the future. Now we know now, everybody, well, not everybody, everybody who reads pop psychology knows that the present is stronger than the future. And kids, they get married because a lot of times their home life sucks big time. So what we have been doing is correcting this belief, and it's very rational. It's about cost benefit in the future, not in present. And nobody really cared about fixing the normative belief about I do this, or I have a personal belief that it may not be good for my children, but what will my neighbor say? What will my community say? So we have to have an intervention, and we did try this. So it's not about, we didn't talk about personal cost benefit analysis in terms of economy or health, but we really say it took the whole village to raise bright girls. So it's about returning or reinvigorating the magical teenhood in the village level. So what we did is basically, at that time, Glee was hot in Indonesia. Okay, so let's create programs where kids, children, girls, and some boys didn't feel that their life sucked big time. And we create the whole social infrastructure like chaperone system and all that. So this thing could happen. So an idea that I really like was from Rembang. It's a small town in Jawa, in Central Java. So usually they had this Queen of the Day event where girls who got married, they were like put up on a nice clothes and being paraded around the town, around the small village. And they wanted to change it as now girl who actually graduated high school would be the Queen of the Day. And I was like, brilliant. So stuff like that we have to think about more. So never think that people care as much as you do. They don't, and it's not their fault. Meet people where they are. And 3, think beyond personal rational beliefs, but normative social beliefs and emotions. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mita. We'll get back to you. But we have also Irfan Amali. Kang Irfan, Peace Generation is I think one of the social entrepreneurs who really understand communication strategies. You came from a publishing background. You participate in the YouTube Creators for Change. How do you create the communication strategies of Peace Generation? Now it has more than 49,000 followers in Instagram, much better than all of us. Please, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Thank you, Mel. Yeah. Actually, we don't have any fixed formula for our communication, but we found along the way. For example, in the first time, we always framing our message, everything something related to peace. And we realized along the way that as Mbak Mita said, that actually people don't care what we care. So we care about peace, but when we ask the young people, they don't care about peace. It is not related with my life. So we found that every time we make like a posting or framing a piece as a piece, so like the engagement is very low. But when we reframe piece with something related with them, like the self-love about, and we package with the related with the movie that maybe is trending now, or we are reframing or repackaging with the, or related it with the Korean drama like that. It's about the self-acceptance, about the personal story, conflict with the friends, or conflict with the parents. So the engagement is very high. So we have the conclusion that we cannot send our message as it is. So our agenda is totally different with audience agenda. So we have to be more humble, to be more humble, to see from the audience eyes, and to feel from the audience heart. So we in the last 3 years, so we change our strategies. If you see our campaign, maybe people will see that peace generation is no longer talking about peace. Yeah, but actually we are consistent in talking about peace, but we reframe and we rewords something related with peace with something related with the people's concern. For example, even we rarely use a tolerance word, because the tolerance in some conservative people, tolerance means liberal, and liberal means something far from the religions, and it is very we got the very many resistance from the audience. When we go to the school and you talk to the headmaster or the teacher, we will teach them tolerance. It means you accuse them that they are not tolerant. And even we have the program countering violence for a student, safe student against violent extremism, because the violent extremism is one of the big issues in Indonesia for the last 5 years. Many donors give the money for countering violent extremism. But when we do this, we never use the violent extremism. Violent extremism even harder than the intolerance and radicalism. It's very sensitive. And violent extremism, it's more sensitive. But we have to do that. So for example, in the 3 years ago, we were challenged to make the campaign or education for students for against violent extremism, and we didn't mention any words about the violent extremism, and we call the program is Board Game for Peace. So we use board game. Why we use board game? Because according to the data, that board game is the revival of the board game is brought by the millennials. So the millennials are gamers generation. So we use the intervention using board game. And in the board game, we put many values behind the board games, in how to make people talk with each other, how to make people collaborate in the board game, because we use the collaborative games. It was amazing experience. For example, when we make it in Palembang, there are some conservative students. Yeah, if you know, like the activists, Muslim activists, Rohis, yeah, they join, and we asked him and her, why did you join this training? So they told us that they are interested in because it is about board game. But in the first day, they were very shocked because we showed them the movie about the former terrorists, and we invite the victim of Bali bombing and everything. So they changed their minds about the terrorism and violent extremism and intolerance. So they changed the mind about the perception. So the label of Board Game for Peace successfully attract them to join the program. And we were happy because the participants is not echo chamber. So there are many people outside our circle, and Yes, it was harder. It was very hard in the beginning of the session because we deal with many people with many resistance. But in the third day, people just has the many version. I didn't. I don't claim that it changed their minds because it is not possible to change the mind within 3 days. But at least they have the consideration about their belief, yeah, about how they see the people from different religion, how they see about the terrorism, violent extremism. So they have the balance, yeah, the other version of some their beliefs, yeah. From many our programs, we found that actually we have to be we have to repackage, rewords our mission using their language, not our language. And the last one is we found that the story about the people is more interesting than the program. So I used to think that the 12 basic value of peace, that our basic formula is something the most important of peace generation. But every time we are invited to the program, to the interview, so the people always keep asking me about the friendship of me and Eric Lincoln as the founders. So it is not about the program, about the formula of peace, but it's about the friendship, about the co-founders, me and Eric Lincoln. And also in the field, we have many agents of peace. So mostly people are interested is not what they are doing, but about who are, who they are. Yeah, we have, like, for example, Mbak Ninin in Solo. She used to be the from conservative family, conservative schools, but she changed the mind and became the teacher, and she helped her student to change their mind about the tolerance and intolerance. So it's about the people, always about the people, always about people. So that's why we created the story of change of agent of peace in last year, and it is all about the people who make peace, not about the peace, but about the peacemakers, the story of peacemakers.
Wow, that's wonderful, Kang Irfan. I learned so much from you. We'll get back to you, but we have our panelists, ALANDA, KARIZA. So ALANDA, from you were young, you have understood the power of storytelling, and you use this to gain support for your initiative. And then you took it even further with your studies and now with your work. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you for the opportunity. So I think just to give some context, so I first started a youth initiative when I was 15, and the Indonesian Youth Conference was started when I was 19. And coincidentally, I wrote my first book when I was around 14 to 15. So like it's sort of like two mixing and matching two of the things that I love into one, and apparently it created a certain impact, and I learned a lot from it. I think what I learned from the experience was that the decade, like the last decade, 2010 or 2009, life for young people was very different. We were not able to volunteer in international NGOs because of child protection policy. So like if you don't have an ID, you cannot, ask people for donations or, give flyers on the street because you're not 18 yet. But we thought, like if it's not now, when is it going to be? Because as soon as we have our full-time jobs, it would be much more difficult to try to volunteer and start a social issue. But then I think in Indonesia also, there's still like a big ageism issue. That's why I think a lot of people on LinkedIn don't really put the years they attended their education, because they are worried that they will be underestimated just because they are young. And that is actually what we faced at the very beginning. But as soon as, the story is being crafted that, hey, you know what, here are a group of people or young people who want to make a change and they were not able to do so because of the system. the idea was picked up quite quickly, and it created snowballing effect because there's a story behind it. It's not just, it's not just a group of young people asking for corporations to give them money to run a concert, for example, but there's a story that if you don't support us here, it would be very difficult for us to create anything elsewhere because of of the rigged system in youth participation. So I think that's what I learned from the experience. And what I learned from it is also that when you're young, you're not really expected to be perfect. You're not really expected to give, like a best-selling book or like a conference attended by 5,000 people, for example. You are allowed to make mistakes. And actually that's the leverage that people can take in, because then you're able to experiment with that kind of story. And I think as you mentioned, that I tried to take it further. So I did some studies with how social entrepreneurs, especially female social entrepreneurs, tell their stories. And what I learned from the experience is that I think a lot of very successful Indonesian entrepreneurs are able to craft that story for the audience. So that's why I think, for example, Kang Irfan, I've known him for I've not known him, but I've heard of him since like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because he's always there to talk about this generation. And it's rarely somebody else, because the figure is very important. And I think that's what's been happening in the entrepreneurship and also youth movement landscape in Indonesia. It's not ideal. I'm one of those people who believe that it shouldn't be, just one person talking about the same initiative over and over again for different years, because the initiative will fall through the cracks whenever that someone retires. But I think that's, and in reality, it still matters the most. Even in unicorns, whenever you see unicorns in Indonesia, the founders really matter, and it doesn't really matter who, like if other people speak on behalf of them, but because they're able to tell that story and they're able to create that change. And I think it's particularly also very important in social initiatives to craft a genuine story on why it matters to you. I agree with what Mbak Mita said earlier, that people don't care about your cost, but sometimes when you craft it well, you are able to make some of them care, even though the rest might need like a more radical approach. But if we begin with a story that is genuine from your heart, if you tell it well, I think it can create a ripple effect in the future in terms of introducing the social initiative or the NGO that you're making, or like the entrepreneurship venture that you're creating. I think that would be my experience.
You studied behavior economics. Can you
Yes.
tell us? We are not familiar with how does this field help social entrepreneurs to refine their communication strategies, storytelling?
Yeah, I think one of the theories that I think Mamita mentioned about that when she said that everybody knows that what is happening at the present weighs more than the future. So I think that's one of the principles in behavioral economics. A lot of the principles in behavioral economics about how we can appeal to this irrational people, the general society, is that sometimes, for example, to make the things that you want them to do to be more salient. So for example, if you want people to donate to the organization, it has to be salient in your website, for example, or in your communication strategy. It needs to be easy to understood. And I think another aspect of it would be to appeal to the emotions of the potential supporters or beneficiaries in whatever you're doing. So, I think, I think what Mbak said also already kind of sum it up, even though I think if you put it like behavioral economics, it sounds like very theoretical, but in terms of the application of it, I think, and I'm very sure that a lot of organizations have been implementing that as well, to try to appeal to people's emotions and the fact that they don't have much time to learn about what we care about. So for example, their elevator pitch, for example, is also, I think it's also applies some of the principles of behavioral science and behavioral economics as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Alanda. Yes.
Can I add about behavior economics?
Sure, you can, definitely.
Okay, behavior economics, what economics did when they realized their model was wrong and they had to steal everything that social psychologists have been studying. In fact, the Nobel Prize from behavior economics was won by a social psychologist. That's it. Trivia of the day.
I see. I see. That's great. So there are two questions from the audience. I will ask this first from Unita. Maybe I think maybe Baby Ruth and Irfan can answer. Unita, would you like to ask this or? Oh yeah, you're muted now. So basically the question is, how do we do something? How can we still help or do something in the midst of a situation that is full of violence and trauma? That's the, if do you have any experience in this situation, or you've heard stories about people who are still able to create change in the midst of trauma and violence, please?
Yeah, I can share a bit of what we're going through right now because yeah, there's a direct attack on press freedom in our country right now when the biggest media company in the Philippines was closed down. And we were asked to look into it as an independent filmmaker. And by saying yes to that, of course, we exposed ourselves to the possibilities of, retaliation and being on the forefront of the attack. The fear will always be there. I can understand, and I think this is the main issue, why it's important, to really look into the structure on how we communicate and design properly so that we can navigate this, within the scope of our own fear, our own insecurities and doubts. It will always be there, but when you just admit, acknowledge that, your fear, and then once you acknowledge that, then you can come up with a design of how you can circumvent that. A SWOT analysis will always come helpful to you, identifying your strength, your weakness, and the opportunities that come within the violence, within the spectrum of the situation that's happening around you, and identifying how can you tell the story best, how can you communicate to your audience who maybe perhaps feeling the same emotions. And one of the key things that we've learned as storytellers is really deconstructing the emotion of fear by using another emotion, humor, using humor and using and communicating with their audience through the eye effect. We call it the eye effect, and speaking to them. Sometimes you can get away with it. Of course, I may be saying this in the context of other religion who may not take humor, lightly, but at least in the Philippines, we used to say our stories, against a political structure by using that context. And it's the same thing we did with Sunday Beauty Queen. And also there's a certain power in using subtlety in storytelling and not directly challenging, certain people, but just focusing your lens or your design, whatever you want to use it, in the spaces, in the gray areas in between that people are not really directly saying, using visual communication, using, poetic words, you can convey certain emotions that can create the impact that you want. And by collecting the audience that you want to speak to, engaging them, then you build a community slowly but surely. I agree with our colleagues here that it doesn't take overnight to really have that shift in behavior, but at least if you develop the community that speaks the same mind and believe the same principle as you do, by using the stories and by relating, with their own experience, then yeah, there's a path that you're creating there, and that you're trailing a new direction that can perhaps grow.
Thank you so much, Baby Ruth. Mita, you'd like to add?
No, I have no experience in handling trauma in my work life. But if you're talking about fear, is fear still effective in communication? It can be effective only if you somehow hint the way out. So one of the latest research that I read, climate change impact makes people depressed and feeling hopeless. But if you're talking about climate action, then they become the effect didn't happen when you talk about climate change action. And also, if you tell your if the news they have used the term climate crisis or climate emergency, the credibility goes off. You still have to use the word climate change. So, fear without fear, then nobody really, wears helmet or seat belt. But because it's a solution, the solution is there. So you cannot people with just fear. Even horror movies, they have denouement, right? So imagine a horror movie when there's no way out. Has it been ever successful?
There's going to be a
Okay.
sequel for that.
Thank you, Mita. So that's one question about driving campaign without fear. That's great. That's great to know that we don't have to always go to fear, and as a matter of fact, fear is not that effective anyway. Next question is from Anika. The advancement role for kids. Can ALANDA reply? How can we encourage people to feel comfortable to share their stories?
I think this is something that I learned from Oak Tree, which is a youth run organization in Australia, or like the biggest one. I think one of the things very important things that they taught their comms team and all the volunteers is that it's very important to communicate with dignity. I think that is something that is often missed by a lot of NGOs or charity organizations that appeal ask to appeal to the masses to give money and support their cause just because their beneficiaries are underprivileged or like less privileged. And sometimes I think a lot of organizations especially in Indonesia, for example, expose the sadness aspects of their beneficiaries in terms of gaining donors. But I think having the principle of communicating with dignity is very important, and it would also lift your beneficiaries or like the beneficiaries to like a better state in crafting and telling their stories. And one of the examples of communicating with dignity is for example that never ever say let's get them out of poverty, but more like let's support them to find a way to lift themselves up out of their problems or their issues. And I think when you craft it that way, people would be more open to tell their stories because they know that they are not being exposed for people to pity them, but more to share the stories on what matters to them and how can what you're doing with the organization, for example, actually help them reach their dreams. For example, some of the I think effective similar communications is about how, for example, like a girl is dreaming to become an astronaut, but then she needs to take a long walk to school, which she has no problem about, but then it reduces the chance for her to complete school, for example. And the money can be used to help her lift herself out of poverty instead of you coming like a savior giving money and then the problem is resolved. So I think it's very important to emphasize that dignity aspect in communication, communicating about the causes that we believe in.
Thank you, Baby Ruth. And then I will have one last question to Irfan.
Yeah, I'd like to compliment Alanda's thoughts also. When we communicate with with the communities and we visit on the field, we adhere to this way of communicating through emphatic means, emphatic way of communication, I think is very important. Gone are the days when we speak to people using hard power and threats people to get what you want, but by using emphatic communication and soft power and really understanding where they're coming from, not just listening to them, but really feeling where they're coming from and what their lives is. I think that's you're opening a channel, for people to open up their stories and create a way or a solution, how we can move forward using the power of storytelling. And I think if we sort of rethink the way we communicate to each other, I mean, we can create a better society, I think.
Okay, thank you, Baby Ruth, because that's a very good segue to my question that I want to ask Irfan. We after this question, we need to post for us, picture for at the end of the session. But Irfan, I know that your story, the friendship story that you always told all the peace agents, your personal story is very powerful. Can you tell us the story of your friendship that then opens up a whole discussion on peace and tolerance?
You mean a story about my friendship with Eric?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For the 1,000 times. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the story actually begin about the prejudice. So I and Eric is from different backgrounds. I am Muslim, he's Christian. I am Indonesian, he's American. And actually, I used to be his students of English course. But there was the conversation about the America, and I accuse America as the main factor of the the war in the world. And Eric was not comfortable because he was accused as to be responsible for for what his nations do. And he saw my beard, and he has the prejudice that I am a part of the conservative Muslim, part of Taliban, and everything like that. So he was shocked at the time. But along the way, we talked and we found that we have the many similarities. So Eric has the activity in teaching students about drugs prevention and gangsters, and I also have the concern about the teaching anti-bullying to students, and we found the similarity has the same concern about the teaching young people about peace. So to make the story short, that actually even me, I was the peace activist, I have the prejudice, and Eric also have prejudice. Also, Eric actually has the long story about the racism in his family. His grandmother was very racist with the Black American, but he changed mind because his brother goes to other part of the world and found the experience about the diversity. So actually, I came from the conservative family, and Eric came from the conservative family. We struggle with the identity, and we work in the same area to teach people about the peace. But even still we have the prejudice. So this is the formula of peace generation, about the breaking down the walls, and to bridging people from different background. And we show to people that we are from the different background, and we broke the walls and start to make the bridge. And that's why peace generation always invite different students from different schools to have the program. We call it the breaking down the walls and bridging. And so we always use this story to show them that we can make it, and if we can make it, you can make it. So it's very simple from the story, and to duplicate the story from in the different ways. We bridging many people from different backgrounds, and we have many stories in the field between, even in the Muslim, in Solo, for example, we have the agent of peace who bridge Muslim from different organizations. Like we have like Muhammadiyah, NU, and they are also sensitive, very sensitive issue like about Ahmadiyah, Shia, Islam Jamaah. It's very sensitive. But when we brought them to the safe space, they can talk one each other in the very honest conversation. Very honest conversation. They broke all the prejudices and they found that everyone is just human being like that.
Okay, thank you so much, Irfan. That's the end of our panel. Let's all open our camera and take a picture. Thank you so much, everyone who came and became part of this conversation. Please follow the speakers in their Instagram and Twitter, LinkedIn, so that you know more. If you want to consult, if you want to ask more, if you want to learn more about their work, please do, because for sure they've really inspired me. Okay, let's have a picture. Nico, are you ready?
Yep, I'm taking now. Smile.
Okay, thank you everyone. Please go back to the main room, and thank you for coming today, and thank you so much, Mita, Baby Ruth, Alanda, and Irfan for joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone. See you.
See you.